What is buffer time? What is buffer time? Is what buffer time?
Greetings, buffer timers. I am Mirror James T. Kirk. Welcome to this edition of Buffer Time. Hey there, everybody. We're going to talk about the Mirror U today. We'll start by introducing each other, going around clockwise. I'm Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
My name is Scott of the YouTube channel, well, what it says there, but backwards, because, Mirror Universe.
Creds, Rats, Dab, I love bad Star Trek. My name is Vanessa, and that's my YouTube channel.
I was going to say, I love bad Star Trek too, but it's not my YouTube channel. Hi, I'm Mirror Universe Dell. My beard will probably not last the whole show, but I had to model it anyway.
Doesn't that technically mean you hate Star Trek? What are you doing here? You're Mirror Universe Dell.
I'm going to talk crap about Star Trek for an hour.
All right. Good one, Norman. All right.
Norman appreciates you.
Norman loves me. I love Norman. We have a secret love affair.
Ooh, risque.
No, yeah, we do. Right, Norman? We do.
Looks like maybe Eve's with us.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm kind of in bed. I'm really sick right now.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
I'm telling everyone my boyfriend gave me a disease and left the country because it's kind of true.
Oh my gosh.
But when you say that, Eve, there's a specific kind of disease I think of.
Yeah, no, he's been sick for 3 weeks with some sort of cold, and he gave it to me, and he just left to go visit his parents in Mexico. So I'm like, I told him I get to tell everyone that he gave me a disease and fled the country.
Maybe he's your mirror boyfriend.
I would hope not. I just moved in with him. I would hope not.
So, getting down to the topic at hand, which Trek show has the most interesting depictions of the Mirror Universe?
That's a toss-up between Enterprise and Discovery for me. Or, sorry, Enterprise and Deep Space Nine.
There it is. Okay.
Yeah, it's a really hard question to answer because I like DS9 and Enterprise a lot, but I like that Disco shows us a completely different version of the Mirror Universe. And so I guess I would pick Enterprise and Discovery.
I would say
Del Pirate. Del is Pirate Del.
I would say Deep Space Nine and Discovery for different reasons. Deep Space Nine was incredibly comic booky. They really leaned into how silly it is while also world building a little bit. But Discovery took it a step further because to me, Mirrorverse by and large is typically Trek but sexy. So instead of just being that, as much as I love Killy, it's a much more fleshed out world in Discovery for me. So I think it if I was going to choose one, it would be Discovery.
Yeah, I'm going Discovery also. They really fleshed that out. I mean, DS9 had a lot of fun with the concept, but Discovery got really serious about it, and I dug it.
The funny thing is, when Discovery first aired, I remember telling a friend of mine, I said, right in the first season, before they even showed any of that, it was only about 3 or 4 episodes in, I told a friend of mine who's a Trekkie, I said, they're setting us up for Section 31 and the Mirror Universe. And he's like, there's no way they're doing that. And I'm like, no, I just get this feeling that they're setting us up for both of those. And bang, we got Section 31, we got the Mirror Universe. And I love that they tied Section 31 to the Mirror Universe.
Very true.
How is it possible to maintain a militaristic hierarchy in a culture where murder is the best or only way to advance in rank?
Klingons do it.
That's exactly what
But
I was
they-
going to say.
Yeah.
But the Klingons have more things that it's part of it, but there's specific circumstances to you actually killing your superior. You can't just
Mhm.
outright do it like in the mirror universe where you just, oh, well, he's dead. I guess I move up in rank.
Yeah, the difference I think is for me is that the Klingon that challenges and or kills another Klingon also has to be qualified for that job. He can't just, like the yeoman can't just wake up one morning and go, stabby, stabby, I'm the captain.
Yeah, as much as we love Tilly, I mean, she just went right
Yeah.
from ensign to captain.
But at the same time, I feel like in the mirror universe, we see examples of people trying to pull that, where someone has no like command training is like, I'm gonna kill somebody so I can take their place.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of like the Roman Empire, where you have a succession of of Caesars knowing that there's a target on their back the whole time and becoming incredibly paranoid. So it's basically running out the clock and trying to outsmart people that are trying to kill you while at the same time trying to run an operation where cohesion is important. But at the very tippy top, there's a fractious dynamic, obviously, because everybody's vying for the top. And it's really just a matter of being smarter than the people trying to kill you.
So basically, Archer through the Enterprise two-parter, which is why I didn't like those two as much, because he just spends the entire time, once he's got the power, like desperately trying to hold on to it, which seems really unlike everyone else we see in the mirror universe, who doesn't seem to have to try as hard before he just gets straight up murdered.
Well, I
Let's
will
get
bring
in
this.
uniform,
I will bring this up later, but my little cliff note for later is we really don't know the evolution of the mirror universe, and so ENT would be, in fact, the first iteration, and then it kind of differs and differs and differs from there. So that's my clip note for later.
You know what I'd like to say about Enterprise is I like that the Enterprise Mirror Universe episodes change the opening sequence.
That's
Yes.
true.
Oh my God. That's so
like
awesome.
to me, the first time I saw that, I was just like, I knew right away something was going to be different. I knew it was going to be like, you know, I didn't necessarily know Mirror Universe, but I knew something was going to be completely different because they really like, I wish the other Star Treks, like I get DS9 was the first one to really get into the Mirror Universe, but I wish other Star Treks would do that too, like change the opening sequence from something inspirational to something like what Enterprise did, where it's war and conquest and, you know, because that really sold it for me.
I think that also
Discovery
falls into
did.
my timeline issue, is that at least in the beginning of Enterprise, we get a sense that the seeds for the mirror universe have existed with humanity for a very long time.
Oh yeah, there's like some book canon to that effect, actually. I forget which book it is, but I think Picard picks up like a copy of The Merchant of Venice, and it's like way more violent than the original, and like their deviation goes back like literally centuries from ours.
Norman says I nicknamed the conclusion of In the Mirror Darkly as Revenge of the Discarded Characters.
Right?
Yeah, it's true. Almost everybody. I think only Hoshi and Travis are the only main characters left at the end, aren't they?
I love how like
I think
everybody's
so.
like, if you're a woman in the Mirrorverse and you're a cast member and you're shapely, you are going to have a midriff reveal.
Except in Discovery.
Right. Yes, of course.
Another
But
thing
I'm
where
saying,
I think the
up
power
until then,
balance,
right,
the power
up
balance
for,
okay, go ahead.
midriff.
I was going to say it shows some differing of the image of femininity between technically DS9 and Discovery. The radical differences of how women are treated as well as how they are dressed. And so I find that to be one of the biggest gaps that I want to play with in my imagination, is sort of how we go from like, you know, sexy characters from TOS to Deep Space Nine, and from there's definitely an evolution of how women are dressed and treated. And I think that to me is some of the fun stuff in my head, is like, how did that change? You
I
know?
have to say the whole weaponizing of sexuality, because that's how I interpret a lot of it. The whole weaponizing of sexuality, like that historically has a precedent in like among the human race, where women have used their sexuality as a weapon. And I mean, James Bond franchise is notorious for women weaponizing sexuality. So to
I
me,
thought of the archetype as being more like Cleopatra,
Yeah.
that kind of
also
archetype.
think like Kira, Nereis's mirror-verse version in
The
particular
attendant.
is very like the evil bisexual trope.
Yep.
Like it's queer representation-ish, but of course she's a villain, similar
have
to
to
what there was in Strange New Worlds.
I got a question for you on that, Vanessa, because you just sparked my brain. Because you mentioned that. Do you think that the reason that they depicted her as being like bisexual or queer there is because that's the only way they could get away with it, was doing it in the Mirrorverse? Considering who was running the show?
Well, they already had a lesbian kiss before the Mirror episodes aired.
Yeah,
So
but
it could be one or the other.
Yeah, but one.
It's hard to pick out the male gaze from the way bisexuality is depicted in the Mirrorverse. Like you said, it's portrayed as a weapon. It's portrayed as a means of dominance. And again, Roman Empire here, like Caligula used sexuality to dominate people. Somebody would say something to him that he didn't like, and then he would take their wife, have sex with them, and then they would come back to the dinner, and then Caligula would be like, hey, that was a bad lay. So this is like, there's a little bit more joy taken in it here, but it's also a means of domination. So I don't necessarily think it's sound representation necessarily. But yeah.
And it runs into the sort of uncanny valley of domination for fun versus domination or sexual gratification because you're frightened or because you actually enjoy what's happening. Like, we don't know if those characters that she's seen lounging with throughout the entire episode are consensually there, or they're there because they're afraid of getting killed.
Right. And as Norman pointed out, queerness isn't depicted in the Mirrorverse. It's like depicted in the Bermanverse as an evil twin of heterosexuality in this instance, essentially.
That's what I was trying to put down.
Yeah.
I'm not as well versed in asking those kind of questions. So thank you, Norman, because Norman kind of gave the words to what I was trying to say.
Right.
No matter how we got to it, I will say one of the things I love about the Mirror Universe is just how open sexuality is. It's not just open; people just are. There's no talk about it. It is, and I love it. Can we get our universe to be there?
Like, even in Mirror Mirror, I mean, granted, it's not but it's good 60s representation, is that Sulu becomes much more of a sexual aggressor. And that kind of shows you the beginnings of the difference between the Mirror Universe and the Prime Universe. This is just so out of character for Sulu. No, and I'm not talking about sexuality. I'm talking about behavior.
Yeah.
That it starts from the very beginning that boldness of different kinds are valued differently in the Prime Universe and the Mirror Universe.
Huh?
What's the pop final there, Scott?
Mirror Sulu. Scarnell.
Oh, because it's the light's reflecting off of it, so I can't see what it is.
Yeah, I realized. Oh well.
So that leads to kind of a big question. So we were talking about just how things just kind of are in the Mirror Universe. And how some of those things might even be nice. What do you got there, Vanessa? What one were you just holding up?
Spock.
Mirror Spock.
Spock.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Rock on.
Yeah, Dell's beard game is better still.
Are we in real life actually living in the mirror universe right now and sowing the seeds of the Terran Empire?
I think so.
I
I
don't want to
mean,
admit it.
look at the way the world is. We've got like, okay, this goes to a conversation I was having with the next door neighbor because she homeschools her kids, and she went to this homeschooling thing, and she said there was somebody there ranting about, of course, every conspiracy that seems to go amongst homeschooling parents. But one of the things that stuck out was the whole, are we in World War III? And I mean, okay, maybe we're not in World War III if we think of it in the sense of the way World War I and World War II were, but we're in World War III in that how many countries are in major conflict right now? How
To be
many?
fair, most of the countries that are in major conflict have been in perpetual conflict for decades.
True, but
To be fair.
perpetual conflict is part of what sows the mirror universe.
Just don't ask half of our country right now because they believe that we're facing World War II.
Oh yeah, right.
That's right.
Trump.
I live in a country. I kid you guys not. I live in a country where right now my city has a petition to remove the corrupt mayor. My province has a petition to remove the corrupt premier, and the country as a whole, in the largest online petition with the most signatures in history, has a petition to remove the prime minister because he's corrupt. So, I mean,
Why not?
What you're saying is, if the next election doesn't go our way, we shouldn't all come knocking on your door.
I guess like what the mirror versus function is to caution us against this kind of dynamic where it's fear-based, where power is consolidated based on murder, exploitation, devaluing of whomever you are encountering. It's supposed to be the antithesis, obviously, mirrorverse of the Federation and Starfleet. That this is what will happen if we don't embrace these sort of principles of unity and try to make progress together and see the bigger picture. And what I think is missing from the story of Star Trek is the one of United Earth, like I said before. And this is what is the outcome, I think, of current circumstances, where it's like people are so, not just like human rights are constantly a topic of debate. And I think that is a bad sign. And it's seen as like both sides. Like there's another side to someone having a right to exist all of a sudden, and that's supposed to be a conversation, and it really shouldn't be. So I think the end result of that is something like this. And I don't know if it'll come out quite exactly like the Mirrorverse, but I think we're definitely careening in the direction of, are people allowed to live? I don't know. Kind of depends on where they live and what color they are. So yeah.
I mean, we know that even in the Prime universe, we need to get through the Bell riots and the eugenics wars and all the really nasty stuff to get to that utopia that we see. But yeah, damned if the mirror universe doesn't look more and more likely every day. I don't want to get too much into the Bell riots because we in August we will definitely be doing a show on that.
Well, that is if they aren't happening.
I swear they're going to happen
That's
here.
a good point.
They're going to happen in Canada. I swear. I swear that's the only thing Star Trek got wrong is it'll be
like
the
consolidation of like financial power. Like the differences between rich and poor are just so huge. The differences in like, you know, the global South versus the global North in terms of life expectancy and all of that, pollution. It's just all kind of, we're getting closer to midnight for sure.
Norman says, remember, baby Khan has to be spared. That brings up the whole would you kill Hitler thing.
That actually brings up another question that we had here.
But like, let's be real, the circumstances would have produced somebody else that would have capitalized on the exact same thing. Yeah. So it's not just a single person that's the problem. It's the environment that created it. But yeah, I don't know if I'd spare baby Khan.
Well, here's a thought experiment, though.
Yeah,
In the
like, can
mirror
we get
universe,
to First Contact Day without there being a military strongman?
Yeah.
maybe. But in the mirror universe, do you think Khan and the Augments tried to create a Federation-like structure, but fell to the fascism of the Terran Empire?
Hmm.
I'm going with that.
I don't
That's my
know if
headcanon.
like how the augments would have necessarily functioned. I got the impression that the Terran Empire was strictly like a xenophobic organization that saw humans as the, you know, the superior race or whatever. And like if there
That is
were
fair.
augments, I would think they would use them to their advantage. As in the Terran Empire, like these are more advanced, strong people. I don't know. That's a good question.
I guess for me, it would go back to the previous question, because I think the seeds of the mirror universe start with slavery, and I don't even need American slavery. Just the idea that you can look at another human being and say, you belong to me, and you get no say about that. Because I really feel like that's the first time humans actively turned on other humans with no reason other than I want to be the more powerful one, so I'm going to collect people. And I think it's been growing, and I think that's where the intro to Enterprise comes from, is that it's always been there as a tiny little seed. And the question is are we in the seed growing phase? But like, what do we do about the giant tree that's growing in our backyard? The root system is going to tear up the foundation. That's where I see where we are right now in the mirror universe, is when you said like we're very close to midnight. I agree with that, but I don't think we're there yet. I also wrote a whole thing, but then I left it out about, I found it very interesting that most of the extras on Mirror Mirror throw the symbol I'm not going to do with a straight palm out. But when Kirk does it, he always has his palm. I don't know if that was a William Shatner thing or if it was like I'm faking the sign, but I don't really know it. But I noticed that like everybody else gave a straight, what I called the Heil symbol. But Kirk always has his palm out. I just found that interesting.
Your theory is way better than mine.
I mean, I always saw the whole connection between the salute to certain 1940s dictator of Germany, but I think
again another
actually
sort
do it that
of
way, but yeah.
like theory in the tree has been growing. I think World War II shows a lot of that as well. Again, this idea that like some humans are better than others.
that sounds very 1984. 4 legs are better than 2. Some 4 legs are better than other 4
That's
legs.
Animal Farm, not 1984.
Sorry, right author,
Oh,
wrong
yeah.
book. By the way, Scott, bring
He had
back
a
the
theme.
cat. Bring back the cat, Scott. You look like a supervillain when you were petting the cat there.
Well, I also think augments might actually vie for dominance of the Terran Empire if that was a thing.
Yeah.
That might
destroy themselves.
happen.
Superior ambition.
But in the mirror universe, though, would that ambition necessarily just pertain to power like it does in ours, though? Because if they were like altruistic, it would change the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nobody knows. It's a thought experiment.
Yeah, I was actually asking a couple of my friends if there's any beta canon that fills in the holes in the mirror universe. Is there a whole novel that explains how we get from TOS to Deep Space Nine, but nothing in TNG? Like, I can think of like meta reasons why that happened, but I can't think of like, if I'm going to live in that universe, what happened between TOS and Deep Space Nine. I mean, we get a little bit of explanation if you look at the second. Give me a second. There's another episode in which Kirk escapes in the Defiant, and he flies off.
The Tholian web.
Yes, thank you. And then the first thing we find in Enterprise is that they find an abandoned Defiant and they decide to take it over, and that's how sort of the ball gets rolling. So there are things that unify each existence of the mirror web, but we don't really know where the evolution comes from.
I think that bothered me the most about the
I have a
universe,
theory.
the mirror universe, because I get not showing the mirror universe in Voyager because Voyager was in a different part of the galaxy, and that was the whole point of Voyager, was sort of a lost in space thing. But that always bothered me, like how we got like mirror universe in the original. Mirror universe is heavy in Deep Space Nine, but nothing in TNG. It didn't make sense.
Maybe they wanted to make sure that there was a very big push to make Next Generation nothing like TOS. So that would be my guess as to why they decided not to do anything having to do with that. And I also think like Mirrorverse needs to serve a solid function that other things can't. And I think when you think of what's antithetical to the Federation in TNG, that would definitely be the Borg. And I thought that was a perfect way to go about that versus just having the actors that are already on set do the opposite of what they're doing.
Mirror Universe Borg, what would they do?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that.
It would be
one of our
Borgatti.
questions.
It would be Borgatti. She is, in fact, Mirror Universe Borg.
That's fair.
Okay.
Because
They would be very individualistic.
Well, but the thing is that she gets jumped in the fake timeline that they get sent back to by Q. So, which is basically the mirror universe where everyone worships Soon, and they, give Picard the title of Borg Slayer. Like, this is as much mirror universe as we're gonna get. And I think that shows sort of the interesting thing about how she gets joined in the mirror universe. So maybe that whole "we're gonna protect this" opening is also mirror universe Borgatti. I don't know, but I think that's an interesting way to look at it.
I'm going to say that the Borg are exactly the same because they're not, I mean, we view them as the evil empire, but in reality, they're just a neutral, they just are. They're moving from one to the next. They assimilate. I think they'd be exactly the same in the mirror universe as they are in the Prime.
Yeah, they're not evil. Like, they're evil to us because of what they represent, but they're not evil. They just, like you say, they just are. I mean, they're like an ant colony. I mean, ants outnumber humans, and we don't like ants, but are they evil? No, they're not. They just are.
I think, like, going to a world and saying, you're just going to be part of us now, and you have no choice in the matter, and we're going to assimilate you and breed more of you so that we can have a bigger hive mind and more Borg ships. I think that's kind of evil. That it's supposed to be the antithesis of Federation, because hegemony in the Federation is voluntary, whereas with Borg, it's involuntary. You are enslaved from that point forward. And I don't know what, like, if somebody could look at like Picard's experience or Seven's experience and call that a neutral experience, exactly. Like,
but look at the motivation. Look at the motivation behind it. Do the Borg have any anger or hatred to other species? They really don't. They
look at people as more or lesser.
Well, yeah,
but being like choosing to assimilate them based on criteria.
They
is
do.
A swarm of locusts evil?
Can I remove the word evil for a second and replace it with something else, which I think is less divisive? The word cruel. I think we look at a lot of
What they do
an added level of cruelty to everybody, to Starfleet, to Ferengi, to whatever. Everyone's just a little bit twisted. I have some thoughts on Quark, but because I don't think he changed, and I think there's a reason. But I feel like in the world, because I agree with Dustin, I think in their own minds, there's no malfeasance. They're doing the good thing.
Yeah,
By
they're
bringing
trying-
everybody together into a communal existence and exploiting the strengths of all of the different races they bring in. It's like super multiculturalism. It's just that the whole lack of autonomy is what frightens us, the viewer.
Yeah, I mean, it would frighten us because the lack of free will is frightening, and it should be, because if you're not given a choice as to how you're going to live the rest of your life, and that would be something to defend yourself against with your life, and I think that would be entirely justified.
but there is no maliciousness. The Borg,
Right, I understand. What I'm saying is, like, it doesn't really matter what's in their heart because they don't have one. They're just like taking over people and assimilating into their own without really regard for what they want.
I think that depends on whether you believe in Borg queens. Because I think Borg queens have motivation. Whereas the Borg before the Borg queens was way more neutral and just absorb. We didn't really get any kind of motivation until we got Borg queens.
That's a good point.
yeah, but to be fair, like it was even stated in Voyager that the whole reason they failed against species 8472 was they could not assimilate them, and therefore they were incapable of learning about them. That for the Borg, assimilation is literally how they learn. It's literally how they interact with the universe because they don't have another way, is the implication. So, I mean, like Dustin said, is a swarm of locusts evil? Like, they're like a swarm of locusts. They exist, they do what they do, but they don't. Even the Borg queen, when you think about it, she only comes forth when necessary. The rest of the time, she's not really there. We just see like endless ships of Borgs.
Right. Like they sort of model the Borg after bees, right? And the queen is essentially there to keep everybody together. And I guess they also needed some kind of emotional pull with the Borg, because I honestly felt that they were creepier without a queen. However, when they started to have like some like more evolved Borg, like not in a Hugh way where it's like somewhat de-assimilated, but a queen with her own sort of personality, that sort of took me out of the fantasy.
So the other what if question that we have here is how is Vic Fontaine a real boy in the Mirror Universe?
Yes!
How does that
I've been
work?
saying this since I watched that episode.
And all I can think of is Pinocchio.
Well, yeah, but you wouldn't expect Tarek Nor in the Mirror Universe to have a holodeck.
I was about to say, do we know?
Mhm.
Do we know that he's human in the Mirror Universe?
Yeah,
or
because
could he
he
be
died.
just an elaborate hologram that just reacts to stimuli.
I mean, he's able to wield guns and die.
Yeah, I guess.
Could, but I would have liked to have seen a.
I think it's
mobile
fan
emitter or
service. I
something.
really think the answer is fan
Yeah.
service.
I was going to go with what Del said. It's fan service. There's no reason for it.
It is. It is fun, but I'm trying to find an in-universe way to make this work, and it's.
I love how polarizing Vic Fontaine is. I like that he's just there for a little bit of spice. Like, he's just so funny, like, generally.
I love
and then
him.
to have him as a real person, it just cracks me up. I don't know.
I just like the real boy comment because I'm seeing Pinocchio here. I'm sorry. I'm a real boy.
What Mirror Universe character would you like to see that we haven't seen? So, like a depiction of somebody that we haven't seen as a Mirror Universe person.
Mirror
Yankee.
Deanna or Mirror the Doctor. Crusher.
Janeway. I'd rather see Janeway.
Oh my gosh.
So you're talking about like the hologram, the Doctor? Is that what you mean, Vanessa?
No, I was thinking of Deanna Troi and Crusher because they're sort of just these maternal, sort of ethereal, like you'll be all better, kind of conciliatory people. Whereas, like, I would like to see them stretch and be something else, like Deanna Troi as Marina Sirtis, essentially. I see Marina as a very boisterous personality that had to be shaved down quite a lot to be a Deanna Troi. So I would like to see her be herself, honestly.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right there.
I'd want to see Pike. I want to see Mirror Universe Pike with like my whole being. Like I thought about this question for a long time, and the first and last name I wrote down was Pike. I just think seeing how in the timeline where he is, like he would still be really powerful because that's back when the Terrans kind of held the control. And so seeing him as like an evil, cool captain almost to me feels like it would blur the lines again between evil and good and just different sort of motivations. But to see him as like supreme captain of a ship, I'm in.
I thought like the sort of medieval episode was sort of his opposite in a way, but I do. And by the way, when you said Terran Empire, I thought you said Karen Empire.
Same thing.
The Karen Empire.
Absolutely the same thing.
Can I speak to your manager?
I need to write now at least a short story about the Karen Empire. I have to. It's going on the list of things I need to write.
The reason why I think Janeway is because I'd like to see Janeway fuck up the Delta Quadrant worse than she already has.
But would Mirror Janeway really be that bad? I mean, Janeway already is this like she's not exactly all good. Tuvix.
No, she's not all good, but we have to look at this. She was thrown into a situation she could not have predicted. She was thrown into a situation that they never would have foreseen. So, I mean,
is Eve or am I frozen?
Huh? No,
I'm not frozen.
No, everybody's good.
My sound went out. I don't know. I didn't hear what Eve said.
Like Janeway, okay, she gets a lot of hate for everything she does, but when you come down to it, she was put in a situation that nobody trains for, nobody predicts, and it's easy for us like and anybody to sit back and be like, yeah, I would have done this, yeah, I would have done this, but we weren't there. Like the whole armchair coaches. So for me, it's kind of like I'd love to see a Mirror Janeway just to see what the hell she could do. Because I
could see Mirror Janeway also seeing her arrival in the Delta Quadrant as a symbol that she should start just effing shit up. I don't know why I edited effing, but not shit. But anyway, like.
Oh, now somebody's frozen.
Now he's frozen.
Yeah, Dell's frozen.
Or even just as Starfleet or Terran Empire Alliance, whatever's going on in that timeline. And sort of seeing everything as something, and almost sort of like what the Equinox went through, I think is almost kind of like what Mirror Janeway could have been, is this, this will get us home in like 5 minutes, but it kills thousands of aliens. Who cares?
Oh, yeah.
My headcanon's definitely that Mirror Janeway purposely created Tuvix. And then when he wanted to be separated,
like the thing about Janeway for me is that she's written so differently for me from episode to episode, where her like orientation towards morals changes depending on the plot. So it's kind of hard for me to imagine a Mirror Janeway, but I would like to imagine that Tuvix gets to live, because why the hell not? And they raise the lizard babies on board, because why not?
I sort of see Janeway as like maybe like somewhere between lawful neutral and chaotic good, if that makes any sense to people. Like she's not quite totally goody two shoes good, but she's not 100% just gonna screw over everybody. But she lands right sort of in the quarter of the dime that has the ridges on it, like right on top. And then every so often they just kind of push her in different directions to see what happens.
Can you imagine Mirror Neelix?
Ugh.
Oh God, no, I don't.
I'd want to
to.
see him as like
I
an
don't.
absolute, like sort of how Garrick turns out without the ambition.
Okay.
Just I want to just be number 2 forever and ever and ever, and whatever you say goes.
I think what you'd have to do, I think you're like halfway there. I think Mirror Neelix is like Prime Universe Garrick.
I would like to think he kills
Okay.
Jetrel, that alien that killed his
definitely.
planet. I would hope so. We make that episode 2 seconds long, mercifully much shorter.
I like that episode.
I did
I know
too.
it's one of on your bad list.
I like that one because it mirrored when Odo met the scientists that raised him.
Played by the same actor too.
Yeah.
Right.
So I like that because there was that tie together, because it's like, in that situation, how would you be? But I like those ones.
And so
I want to jump in there with a slightly related comment. I also find it interesting, sort of, that the Mirror Universe isn't moral-less either. Either because they have their own set of morals, or because they don't always make what we would call the evil. Like, not all cruel decisions are evil. Sometimes cruelty is necessary. I mean, we see that with like Tuvix, and we see that. I mean, every captain has made a decision along the way that we've all been like, who's dancing with who in the moonlight? Like, I feel like there's always this line that they kind of toe, and I find that endlessly interesting. And especially when you apply it to characters and try to figure out where that wavy line of morality would sit with them personally. Like, Spock was still logical, and he didn't just like stab them on eyesight because they were different. He wanted to puzzle it out. He was still using a different sense of but logic. He was like, in the same way that I thought about during this episode in drag. And then I realized, no, that's too close to who I am in real life, but I can still be Del behind a beard too. Right. And that's almost more unusual for me. Even though I have facial hair, you just can't.
Has anybody seen a sketch show called Mitchell and Webb? Has anybody seen that before? Anyways, there's a skit where they are essentially playing World War II bad guys, and they have like a skull and a crossbones on their hats, and they're in the trenches, and one of them looks at the other and goes, "Are we the bad guys? Are we like on the wrong side of history right now?" And why I bring that up is because I don't think when people are doing evil things that they think they're doing something purposefully bad. They're not like, we're gonna be bad. Like, nobody goes out, wakes up and says that. So there's a rationale behind it that makes them think that they're not doing something horrible. But I think unequivocally the Terran Empire is pretty horrible.
You just made me think of the book All Quiet on the Western Front, because it's if anybody's read that, because it's one of those few World War, I forget if it's, I think it's World War II novels where it's written from World War I. Okay. Where it's written from the perspective of the Germans as opposed to written from the perspective of the Americans. And you see, and you're following this kid who became a soldier in the army because he had to. And there's a scene in the book where he's in a foxhole with a guy, and like a dead guy, and he's like going through his pockets, and he's just kind of sitting there thinking, what am I doing? Like, what am I the bad guy? Like, in another life, me and this guy could have been friends. We could have, gone for beers together. Like, he had a family, he was a person. So you just made me think of that for some reason.
I usually couldn't, when I'm talking about that kind of concept in real life, I call it nobody thinks they're a bad driver.
Mm-hmm.
There are some, I know I'm off the road because I'm a terrible driver, but if I had to hop in a car and go somewhere right now, other than controlling the feet pedals would be a little rough for someone who can't move their feet. But I still think that if like my partner were in an emergency, I could just throw her in the car and drive her to the hospital. But I know I'm a terrible driver. Like, I've driven off the road before, like for no other reason than I wasn't paying attention, like whatever. But I've never met, I'll say I have very rarely met people that drive cars currently who think they're a bad driver. Like everyone thinks they're better than everybody else on the road. Like, oh my God. I mean, when I lived in Maryland, we called it water soluble driving skills because every time there was a rain, everyone like was driving crazy, including you. And so like, I kind of go back to that philosophy. I don't think anyone in the mirror universe thinks they're evil, but I also don't think that like, I don't know, rebellious Klingons think of themselves as being evil. I think everyone's just doing what they think is right and just have very different mindsets of what that is. I mean, even so far as like, am I a bad person? No. Do I sometimes make conscious decisions not to do things I really want to do, even though they would be considered bad or evil? Like sometimes I'll do it. I'll be shady. I'll call a girl out, like, but at the same time, I'm not going to like walk up to somebody random and be like, oh my God, you are so ugly. Goodbye. Like there's a time and a place where you can kind of let that demon out. And sometimes I think maybe the mirror universe is also allowed both the characters and the actors to kind of feel out like, what if I just worked on impulse and just did everything I wanted to do and I never took anything else into consideration? Is that my mirror universe me? But that goes deep into philosophy and I can go on to that.
Yeah. And the thing is like with Giorgio, when she goes back and becomes like a changed person, I think that like, that's what makes the mirrorverse like sort of stick together, is that people notice that she's different when she returns, that she's no longer eating Kelpian, you know, there's a noticed difference in the amount of harm that she was creating before she went to, you know, 32nd century Federation versus the Mirrorverse in that present day. And it's like she had to sort of walk this weird line of like, I gotta present as dominant and, you know, the Empress, but at the same time, I'm not going to do, I have like a very, I've interfaced with Kelpians as equals and I can't eat them anymore. So, you know, they kind of know the difference, I think, in World 2.
Is that going to is that going to like sow the seeds of why the Terrans lose control of their empire then, maybe?
Yeah, I'm going to answer a last question real quick, and then I will actually call that question right there, Eve. I'm going to say that the two characters I would like to see that we haven't seen as a mirror universe is Jack Ransom and Dr. Tana. I am honestly kind of shocked that we haven't had a mirror universe episode of Lower Decks yet. I mean, that seems like just a natural thing for them to do.
My brain says there's been a reference, but you couldn't get me.
The simulation.
Was there a simulation? I remember there being a reference to it.
It kind of seems to me in this newer iteration of Trek that they're, you know, in the absence of Mirrorverse, they kind of use Section 31 as a stand-in for that. So I kind of saw the introduction of that, the double that, dang it, the main character, his initiation into Section 31 as the mirror universe.
Wendler?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that's gonna definitely come back around this coming season. It has to. So, do you think we'll see more Mirrorverse in either Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds?
I can't believe Strange New Worlds, with its attitude of trying out new ideas and swinging hard, they gotta do. Well, I told you it wasn't gonna last. They have to do something about it in Strange New Worlds. I just think that like if they're gonna do a musical, they gotta do a mirror universe episode.
The musical does not exist. We do not acknowledge its existence.
I do. Yeah, I loved it, and I think it was plot worthy. You weren't here for that episode, Eve, so you don't get to have an opinion now.
Wow.
Wow. Except I'm the one professional musician, and from a professional musician standpoint, there is so much wrong with that episode.
And I'm a professional Broadway actor who saw nothing wrong. So we can have this argument another day.
Oh, we will.
But you did find something wrong. You were mad about the footfalls.
Yes,
amongst other
that was the
things.
one part I hated, Eve, was that you could hear the dancers hit the floor during the dance scenes. That was my only complaint.
But all right, let's get to that question that Eve
Yes.
brought up that we
Okay.
have here. If one event in history puts us on the path to the Terran Empire, which event do you think that is or was? Scott, you've got an interesting theory.
I do. Despite the fact that there's, book canon that says it goes back centuries, I'm just going with a pop culture answer. The mirror universe branched off from ours when Hitler got the shit murdered out of him in Inglourious Bastards. And that led to this hyper-violent Tarantino universe where the movies are actually all interconnected, where everybody started using, again, hyper amounts of violence to solve their problems and to move up in the world. And I don't know if it helps, but I've racked my brain, and I can only think of one actual Star Trek reference in a Tarantino movie. So it kind of implies that doesn't exist in his universe.
Mirror peanut hamper. Sorry, that's funny.
So I have
that's
what I
off
consider
topic,
to be
but
a
it's
slightly
very-
funny answer. Going sort of where Scott was going, I would say the beginning of video games, because they've caused all kinds of problems with and I'm saying this as a kid who grew up in the 80s. We had people, national, political people going on screen saying that video games were causing all of this violence. And then back then, video games were like Tetris. We didn't have Grand Theft Auto back then. It was like why Pong is going to bring down the universe. And so I've been hearing it. I've been hearing it since I was little.
Have you seen that Robin Williams movie Toys?
Yes, it's one of my favorite movies of all
Yeah,
time.
and I was thinking about that, where it's like they're essentially training people to be combat, to be like remote control combat people, and guess how accurate that was anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tetris, to be fair, was but the thing with Tetris is because it was a Russian game and invented by the Russians, that's where some of the outrage for that came from. I mean, the theme song is literally an old Russian revolutionary drinking song. So
I think Berenstain Bears and Bernstein Bears, that split
100%.
over.
100%. I have to mute myself so I can laugh.
I'm going with this is not going to be popular, but I'm going with the rise of communism, socialism.
Ooh.
Because World War II, as disastrous as it was and everything, in a way, other countries contributed to that happening because of the sanctions they put on Germany. But no, I would go with communism, socialism, because even today, there is no more destructive kind of political thinking than communism, socialism, because look at the countries that are under communist socialist governments: North Korea, Russia, Venezuela.
Russia is not technically communism anymore, and the only ones that are, they just call themselves communist and don't have anything really to do with communism. But that's a whole other deep topic that we do not need to get into.
That's why I said communism, socialism. I'm saying that kind of philosophy, like China.
Can I want to interrupt for 1 second, please. As a democratic socialist, I am absolutely going to say there is no equivalence between communism and socialism, because socialism is economic and communist is policy and government. And the two don't have to live together. You can be a Democrat and work in elections and believe in civil rights and still be a socialist. So let's not equate the two or conflate the two.
No, but the two often tend to go hand in hand, is what happens.
That is not true.
I am not going to get into this argument with you, but
I'm going to say as someone who identifies as a socialist, who interacts with other socialists, that there is a false link between communism and social. You could have a communist capitalist society. That's all I'm going to say, and then I'll leave it. Just let's not discuss it.
Then I guess my opinion that communism, socialist governments being those seeds to the mirror universe, I guess that's not valid then.
No, I just said that I don't.
No, it
It
can
would
totally
be
be
the same like you
valid.
said a slur
Absolutely
about
valid.
homosexual people. Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like as a queer person, I see that as a slur.
I
No,
do
no,
see a slur.
forget it. You're taking it in the specific, and I'm
You can-
trying to make a
I'll be
metaphor
honest-
for the
to be
big.
honest, Del, I'm not understanding you is what's happening. I'm getting I'm not understanding you.
Okay.
And this is why we don't talk about politics.
Unfortunately, mirror universe is a political system.
Okay, how do we feel about the Section 31 Mirrorverse connections?
It's really telling in terms of storytelling and writing that Section 31 is now a recognized part of the Federation. And you know, they're known for doing horrible crap. Whereas the Mirrorverse is supposed to be the opposite. So to link them together, it's like, okay, you're about spreading goodwill, equity, love, you know, acceptance and all that jazz. And yet you have Section 31, which is all about assassinations, big or small, and genocide. So which is it?
I have a theory about it. Some of that Section 31 was actually created by people from the mirror universe.
That makes a sad amount of sense.
Okay.
Because the ends justify the means when you're Section 31, plus Section 31, unlike the Federation, realizes that just because the Federation plays, you know, every day is Care Bear land, Section 31 realizes the rest of the universe isn't going to play by your rules just because they're your rules. So to me, I get the sense that maybe some people from the Terran Empire crossed over and realized the need for Section 31 to protect the Federation from itself, essentially, because, I mean, somebody's got to do the dirty work so people can play in paradise. And the
That would've been,
Federation,
like, really. Sorry.
the Federation really doesn't have people who are willing to do the dirty work.
That would have
So
been like really early on, though, right? Because isn't Section
I
31
guess like I reject the notion that it takes dirty work at all. That's me. That's just me, though.
I think everything
Yeah.
we've seen both in our real world and in the Star Trek universe, it absolutely, somebody needs to do the dirty work.
Yeah, we just don't want to know.
yeah, who is it in Deep Space Nine? I think it's Sloan that says it's easy to be a saint in paradise, or something similar to that. I know that came up in Deep Space Nine. I might not be quoting it
Cisco
correctly.
was the one to say it, but yeah, Sloan does say something to that effect.
Yeah. And it's implied in Enterprise more than once that somebody needs to do the dirty work so other people can enjoy it. Because your world plays by one set of rules, but the rest of the universe is not going to play by your rules just because you think your rules are the best. Hence why we have Tal Shiar, we have the Obsidian Order, you know, heck, we have Vulcans lying in Enterprise and spying on Andorians.
Right. And those were like recognized and sanctioned pieces of those governments. Whereas before, you know, the current iteration of Kurtzman Trek, those two, like Section 31 and the Federation, were not linked. It was like acting in the best interest of what they believed was the best interest of Starfleet, which is debatable all by itself. But they were not officially linked until now.
Yeah. Section 31 is literally Section 31 of the charter.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
So
Right.
it's
And like there's always extremists that sort of like say, oh, I took, this founding document as a reason for me to exist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you could cut it either way.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably, written in for, the absolute best reasons. Whenever it's like, well, we got to do this stuff instead, and it's all justified because we're doing it for the best reasons.
somebody put in the comments section, did Section 31 create the mirror universe accidentally?
Oh,
That's a good question, especially when you've got like what's his name?
that guy.
Toward from Discovery. The
Lorca?
Section 31 dude. No, the Section 31 dude.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about.
Not Control, the guy. Oh, damn it.
I can see his
Norman
face.
said Sloan.
Yeah, no.
No, not from, no.
He's alive yet.
Either way, but he was.
Whelan.
He knew, yeah.
Whelan, yeah.
He knew a no.
No,
From
that's not right.
from later in when they go to the 32nd century. Who is the Section 31 dude?
Cronenberg's character.
Yeah, him. I can't remember off
Nope,
the top of
totally
my head
blanking.
either. Either way, he knew an awful lot about Section 31 and was really intrigued with it. And by that, when we also find out in that episode that they haven't had any contact with the mirror universe for over 600 years, that lends some credence to that theory that maybe they know more than they're letting on. All right, so
I don't have a problem with Section 31 because I look at the US and it's like, yeah, the US has entire things going on that their government doesn't even know about. Same with some other countries that are world powers. They've got sections of their government that basically are Section 31s. So for me, makes sense that there would be one.
But is it necessary? Should that even be? Like it's absolutely not. We don't need to be making puppet governments and like rigging elections and shit. Like that's not a good thing.
I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying it happens. Like,
well, some of the things
I
you just
understand
brought
the matter
up.
of factness of what you're saying. I'm saying like I think Section 31's purpose is to show us that isn't necessary. That it's not necessary to consolidate power that way and push things in, according to what you think is Starfleet's best interest or Federation's best interest. Like that's what I glean from it personally. That's why I find the glorification of it so confusing.
Norman says CIA, NSA. Remember Kissinger, but I don't know who. My mind is blanking on who Kissinger is. So.
Oh my gosh.
Secretary of War for Nixon, if I'm not mistaken.
Started the Vietnam War.
There's a Secretary of War? Oh my God.
Well, there
No,
used to be. It's Secretary of Defense now. It used to be called Secretary of War, and I don't remember when that change was, but it was somewhere in that time frame. So.
But yeah, CSI, NSA, I mean, if you know your Rick and Morty canon, it's all squirrels. They run the world.
But even all those organizations are beholden to the U.S. government. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things we can go into. I mean, some of the things that Vanessa said, like, yeah, should we be rigging elections and doing all this other stuff? No, but there are definitely things. You need these guys to fight off the plots that the other governments that have these agencies are doing to you more than anything. That is
right. And that's more of a defensive thing. And the thing is, like, when you have people that are sort of like on your side, but willing to do things like assassinate world leaders and push your, friendly with America agenda onto a country that isn't you, then that becomes a slippery slope. And that's how you get things like, FMLN in El Salvador and, Project Condor and things like that, where it's like you're destabilizing entire regions because, well, it's a self-defense thing,
I think this question has become a slippery slope, and we're beyond an hour. I think we should move to a last really fun question that we should all have some fun answers for. We're here for this, and some of you were not a few weeks ago. The ever popular Marry, Date, or Transport into Space Mirror Universe Edition. Ooh. So, tell me the Mirror Universe characters that you would either marry or date, or the ones that you would transport into space. And go.
I want to date Kelly. She'd probably kill me, but I think the squeeze is worth the juice.
I'm straight up marry Killy. Marry Killy. Absolutely.
I'm marrying me some Mirakira because Mirakira.
All
I'm
right.
going with Giorgio, and I would beam Sloan into space.
I don't think Sloan counts. Is mirror universe, not
That's
section.
right.
I know we got on such a long Section 31 thing.
Yeah, right.
To me, he is a very mirror universe kind of guy, but
Now they're just blending in my head.
Yeah,
Okay, so like for a minute, it's what would Sloan be in the mirror universe though? He'd be the good guy. He'd be the president of the fucking Federation.
He'd be a bureaucrat. He'd be a bureaucrat who sits in an office
I
and
think
just
so.
stamps paper all day.
Yeah, probably.
he'd be a
So,
Vogue.
marry Phlox,
Okay.
date
Oh.
Killy, transport Sulu. Sorry, Scott, but transport Sulu.
That's fair though. I mean, he was really
Oh my.
the words I can't say all up on Uhura.
Yeah, that's fair. He was bad
Yeah,
at his job of transporting Mirror Archer.
I'm gonna marry Killy.
Scotty
I'm
Bax
gonna-
isn't coming back.
I'm gonna date Worf as the regent.
Oh.
I'll come back to me about who I'm gonna beam into space.
I'd be Mirror Kirk into space. He's just as sleazy as Mirror Kirk as he is as Kirk.
Transport Archer, Norman said.
Yeah, I think I'm going with that. Yep. Transport Archer into space.
Norman says Mirror Stamets was hot.
I mean, it's basically the same, so yep, sure.
Transport Archer.
We are agreed on this.
I think it's weird with Sulu too, knowing like the actors that the actor himself is not into women, seeing him be that way. It's kind of, I don't know, to me he plays it real, it's almost like he plays it too well because in real life he's not into. Kind of like when you have like Neil Patrick Harris playing straight characters.
Oh yeah.
That's kind of where I was thinking of, because I mean, when I watched original series, I obviously knew by then that George Takei was, he was gay. So, but
Right.
I have that's one thing I just noticed about him is he plays that role really, really almost too well. And it reminds me of when Neil Patrick Harris plays similar types of roles. He plays it too well almost. So I have to wonder if he's bringing in if it's his perspective that makes it that good.
Right.
I could be just spitballing here. It's just weird things that roll around in my gumball machine brain.
All right. If we don't have any more answers to that one, I think we're gonna get on out of here. I'm not sure exactly what next week is going to be. I would like to say queers in space, but we'll get back to you when we find out exactly who can make it next week. So until then, I'd like to thank the co-hosts for joining me here today, and all of you for watching. And we'll catch you again next week. Until then, live long and prosper.